I didn't expect the entire room to go silent because of me, especially not at my own sister's wedding. I chose to walk in alone, not because I had no one, but because I refused to arrive as someone's shadow. I wanted, just once, to feel what it meant to stand on my own name without it being softened, explained, or attached to a man. The ballroom glittered like something out of a magazine. Crystal chandeliers, polished marble, people dressed like they belonged to a different world. And the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. Not attention, judgment. Eyes moved fast, calculating. Conversations dipped, then resumed in hushed tones. I didn't need to hear every word to understand them. No ring, no date. 30 and alone. I walked forward anyway. Each step felt deliberate, like crossing a stage where the audience had already decided the ending. A few women near the aisle leaned into each other, their smiles thin and sharp. One of them didn't bother lowering her voice. Such a shame. All that success and still... nothing. I almost laughed. Nothing. If only they knew what nothing had built. At the front, Vanessa stood glowing under the lights, wrapped in lace and perfection. She didn't look at me. Not once. Her world was complete now. Husband, spotlight, approval. There was no space left for the sister who never quite fit the picture. I paused near the back rows, debating whether I should stay or quietly disappear before dinner was served. It would have been easier, familiar even, but something in me refused to shrink this time, so I stayed. And then the unexpected happened. A chair scraped against the floor. It wasn't loud, but it carried. At the central table, a man rose slowly to his feet. Age had silvered his hair, but it hadn't dulled his presence. The kind of man people instinctively made room for without knowing why. I recognized him instantly. Adrian Sinclair, a name that moved markets, shaped industries, and made headlines across continents. The groom's uncle. A man people whispered about with a mix of admiration and fear. And he was looking directly at me. The room followed his gaze. For a second, I thought maybe I was mistaken, that he was acknowledging someone behind me. But no. He stepped forward. And then, in full view of everyone, he inclined his head, not a nod. A bow, deliberate, respectful, unmistakable. The air shifted. The whispers died mid-sentence. The same people who had just dismissed me now looked confused, unsettled, like they had missed a crucial piece of information. I didn't move. Couldn't. Because in that moment, something old cracked open inside me. I wasn't new to being underestimated. Growing up, Vanessa had always been the easy story, the one everyone loved to tell. She laughed at the right moments, charmed the right people, fit neatly into expectations. I didn't. I was the one who dismantled appliances just to understand how they worked. The one who stayed up past midnight solving problems no one asked me to solve. While she practiced smiles in the mirror, I built things no one around me fully understood. My parents didn't stop me, but they didn't see me either. You'll figure it out eventually, my mother used to say. Like my passions were just a phase waiting to fade. They never did. I didn't grow out of it. I grew into it. And somewhere along the way, the quiet girl they overlooked became someone the world couldn't ignore, even if her own family still did. Back in the ballroom, Adrian straightened, his eyes steady on mine. "Miss Vaughn," he said, his voice carrying just enough to reach the nearest tables. "It's an honor to finally meet you." Finally. That word landed harder than anything else because it meant he already knew who I was. The room stirred again, this time not with judgment, but curiosity. Vanessa turned then. For the first time that evening, her gaze found mine. And I saw it. The flicker of realization, not about my dress, not about my being alone, but about everything she, and everyone else in that room, had never bothered to understand. I took a step forward, no longer feeling like the outsider at the edge of someone else's celebration, because suddenly, I wasn't the forgotten sister in the back row. I was the woman even power stood up for. And for the first time in my life, the silence around me wasn't filled with doubt, it was filled with recognition. People like to say beauty opens doors. No one talks about what it quietly closes behind someone else. My sister never had to knock. Life just parted for her. Smiles came easy, opportunities easier. Meanwhile, I learned early how to exist in the corners. Noticed, but never quite welcomed. Not disliked, just endured. Years passed, and that quiet distance between us stretched into something unbridgeable. She built her life fast. Romance, wedding, promises that looked perfect in photographs. Then came the cracks. One marriage ended, then another. But the third time, that was different. Logan wasn't just another chapter, he was an upgrade. Wealth, influence, the kind of surname that carries weight in rooms you don't even enter. Suddenly, my family moved like orbiting satellites around her again. Dinners got fancier, conversations louder, pride, carefully curated. And me? I became a side note again. When the invitation came, it felt more like obligation than welcome. There was an unspoken message wrapped inside it. Be present, but don't be seen. I almost didn't go. But something in me refused to stay away this time. Maybe curiosity, maybe something else. The morning of the ceremony, my mother called. Not to ask if I was okay, but to remind me to keep things simple. No bold choices, no statements. As if my existence itself was too much decoration. I agreed, of course. And then I ignored her. I wore black, not dramatic, not flashy, just sharp, deliberate, clean, honest, the kind of presence that doesn't beg for attention but doesn't apologize either. When I arrived, I felt it immediately, the subtle shift in the air, conversations dipping, eyes lingering a second too long, not admiration, not even judgment, just curiosity, edged with quiet disapproval. I walked past clusters of strangers who already had opinions about me. One voice slipped through, barely hushed. That must be the sister. No need for more context. I understood the tone. The ceremony itself was a spectacle, every detail engineered to impress. Flowers towering like architecture, music echoing just right, cameras capturing angles no one asked for. It wasn't a wedding, it was a production. I played my part, smiled when required, applauded on cue. Vanessa passed me once before everything began. Her acknowledgement was brief, almost mechanical, like checking a box. And somehow that hurt more than if she'd ignored me completely. So I sat alone, exactly where I was expected to be. Unremarkable. Background, invisible. But invisibility has its advantages, because while everyone else was focused on her grand moment, no one noticed who had taken the empty seat beside me halfway through the reception. He didn't introduce himself right away. Just sat there, calm, observant, as if he had been watching the same performance I had. When he finally spoke, it wasn't small talk. Strange place to feel like an outsider, isn't it? I turned to him then. And that's when everything shifted, because Edward Sinclair wasn't supposed to be there, and somehow he was looking at me like I was the only real thing in the entire room. The moment the room went silent, I realized I had already been judged long before I ever walked in. By the time I arrived, the reception had fully bloomed into something extravagant. Crystal lights dripping from the ceiling, waiters gliding between tables with trays of designer drinks, every detail polished to impress people who expected nothing less. It didn't feel like a wedding. It felt like a showcase. My seat was exactly where you'd expect it to be, far from the spotlight. A long table near the back, tucked behind pillars and floral arrangements. The kind of placement that says, "You're invited," but not important. Two relatives I barely knew occupied the seats beside me. They greeted me with polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Within minutes, one of them tilted her head and asked why I came alone. "I thought someone like you would have settled down by now," she said lightly, as if she were complimenting me. I gave a small smile, the kind you wear when correcting them isn't worth the effort. Accomplishments mean different things depending on who's measuring. Here, it clearly wasn't mine. Up front, Vanessa looked like she belonged to another world entirely, draped in perfection, surrounded by her new family like she had just been accepted into an exclusive club. Every laugh she gave was met with admiration, every glance acknowledged. Her new mother-in-law barely moved her face when she smiled, but her eyes moved plenty. I caught them drifting toward me more than once. Curious, appraising, dismissive. At one point, I overheard her voice float across the table. "That's the sister, isn't it? The one who never slows down?" Soft laughter followed. Not cruel, not kind either. Just enough to remind me I didn't fit. I stood up before the weight of it settled too deep and made my way to the bar. The bartender handed me a drink I didn't really want, but it gave me something to hold on to. I hadn't even taken a sip when Vanessa appeared beside me. Her smile was practiced, careful. "I wanted to make sure you're okay," she said. The question felt almost foreign. We had drifted so far apart that concern now sounded like courtesy. "I'm fine," I replied. She studied me like she was trying to remember something she had forgotten. "You feel distant." A small laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "We haven't really spoken in years." She winced, just slightly. "Well, you came. That matters." I thought about asking her something real, something honest, but she was already stepping away, already pulled back into her orbit before the moment could become anything more. I returned to my seat. That's when I heard them. Voices just behind me, low, amused, careless. "She's attractive, sure, but there's something cold about her." "Career type," the other added. "The kind who shows up alone and expects applause for independence." They chuckled. I didn't turn around, didn't react, but something inside me tightened. For a second, leaving felt like the easiest choice. My coat was within reach. The exit wasn't far. I could walk out, disappear, and none of this would follow me. And honestly, no one here would stop me, but then... A chair scraped loudly against the floor. Not rushed, not accidental, intentional. The sound cut through the room like a signal. Conversation stalled. Glasses paused midair. I looked up. At the head table, a man stood. He didn't stand like the others, no showmanship, no need to draw attention. Yet somehow, all attention bent toward him anyway. His presence carried weight the room couldn't ignore. He stepped forward, slow and composed, moving past the center of the celebration as if it didn't belong to him. Then he stopped, right in front of me. For a second, I thought I misunderstood what was happening, until he bowed. Not a nod, not a polite gesture, a full, deliberate bow, the kind reserved for someone held in the highest regard. The room reacted instantly, gasps, whispers, the faint click of phones capturing the moment. Confusion spread like a ripple. I didn't move. Couldn't. Because I knew him. Not from tonight. Not from this world. Years ago. Before any of this. I had taken on a case no one else wanted. An old business on the verge of collapse, drowning in quiet debt and quieter enemies. I worked behind the scenes, rebuilding what others had written off. No recognition. No spotlight, just results. That business had been his, and the man now standing before me, Edward Sinclair, wasn't just another guest. He was the reason half the people in this room had their wealth, their status, their carefully constructed lives. He straightened slowly, meeting my eyes with a calm certainty. "I was wondering how long it would take before you were overlooked again," he said, his voice carrying just enough to reach the nearest tables. The silence deepened. "Some people," he continued, "build things so others can shine, and then they're forgotten in the glow." His gaze shifted briefly toward the front table, toward Vanessa, toward her new family. "I don't forget." The room didn't know how to respond, but I did. For the first time that night, I didn't feel out of place. I felt seen. I didn't expect the silence to feel louder than the music, but the moment he said my name, the entire room shifted. I had barely touched my drink when he approached. Tall, composed, the kind of presence that didn't need introduction. Conversations faded mid-sentence as he stopped in front of me. "Miss Vaughn," he said, steady and precise. "I've been meaning to meet you." For a second, I thought he had the wrong person. People like him didn't notice people like me. At least that's what everyone here believed. Then he continued. "Your Zurich presentation rewrote how my companies handle digital transitions. We restructured 3 divisions because of your model." The words landed like a dropped glass. Around us, heads turned. The same people who had spent the evening overlooking me were now watching like they'd missed something important, and suddenly realized it. I gave a small nod, controlled, careful. I appreciate that. It wasn't humility. It was restraint. He didn't leave after that. Instead, he motioned quietly for a server, asked for a drink, then looked back at me. "Walk with me?" I agreed, not out of excitement, but because I understood what was happening. Moments like this didn't just pass. They settled. And I wanted this one to settle exactly where it belonged. We stepped outside, the noise of the reception muffled behind glass doors. The terrace was cool, dimly lit, a sharp contrast to the staged perfection inside. "I recognized you immediately," he said. I leaned lightly against the railing. "That makes one of you." A faint smile crossed his face. "They only see what's presented to them, surface impressions, familiar patterns." I didn't respond. He didn't need confirmation. Your work, he continued, shifted a decision worth nearly 200 million. We were ready to back a different firm. Then your model changed the trajectory. That caught me off guard, not the praise, the detail. That wasn't public, I said. No, he replied calmly. But I don't rely on public information. I studied him then, more carefully. This wasn't casual recognition. This was calculated awareness. You didn't mention any of this inside, I said. He let out a quiet breath. Most people in that room wouldn't understand the significance, including your relatives. That word hung between us. And Logan? I asked. A brief pause. Then, almost amused. He benefits from what others built. That's not the same as building. There it was, the truth no one inside would say out loud. I looked back toward the ballroom through the glass. My reflection stared back, composed, distant, unchanged. But I knew what it had taken to get here. The nights without sleep, the uncertainty, the quiet grind no one applauded. Inside, I was just the odd one out. Out here, I was something else entirely. When we returned, the shift was unmistakable. Conversations lowered, chairs adjusted, eyes followed. No one laughed anymore. Vanessa reached me before I could sit. What did you say to him? She whispered sharply. Her smile brittle for the crowd. I met her gaze, calm, steady. Nothing he didn't already know. Her expression tightened. You really couldn't let tonight be about me, could you? For a moment, I almost felt something. Almost. But it passed. You've had every spotlight handed to you, I said quietly. Tonight didn't change that. Her grip on the bouquet tightened. She turned before I could say more. Walking away faster than Grace allowed, the speeches started soon after. Laughter returned, but it sounded different now. Forced. Measured. And as the evening unfolded, something subtle kept happening. People began approaching me, not warmly, not genuinely, but cautiously. Like they were trying to correct a mistake they didn't realize they'd made until it was too late. I sat there, listening, watching, understanding. It was never about who I was. It was about who noticed, and the most powerful man in the room had. But the real shift, the part no one else understood, had nothing to do with him at all, because as I checked my phone beneath the table, a single message waited for me. Funding approved. Full acquisition cleared. You now own controlling interest. I glanced up slowly, scanning the room. Vanessa, Logan, their polished world. And for the first time, I allowed myself a small private smile. They thought tonight was a wedding. They had no idea. It was a takeover. The moment the room turned against itself, I realized silence could be louder than applause. I hadn't said much all evening. I didn't need to. People had already decided who I was the second I walked in. Black dress, no partner, seated near the edge like an afterthought in a carefully staged celebration. I let them believe it. It made things simpler. Across from me, Edward stayed longer than anyone expected. He spoke quietly, occasionally dropping comments that sounded ordinary but carried weight if you knew how to listen. No one else at the table did. They nodded, smiled, missed everything. Then came the final toast. Logan's father stood, glass raised, voice thick with pride and performance. He drifted through the usual script. Family, legacy, unity, until his gaze flickered in my direction, just for a second. But it was enough. And to those who grace us tonight, he added with a thin smile, even the ones who seem more comfortable in boardrooms than among family. A ripple of laughter spread, light and dismissive. I didn't react, but Edward did. He placed his glass down with deliberate care and rose to his feet again. The room quieted faster this time. I'd like to correct something, he said, voice calm but cutting through the noise. We celebrate wealth like it's an achievement. Often it's just timing, or luck. Sometimes it's simply inheritance. The air shifted, he continued, turning slightly toward me. But the woman sitting here built something out of nothing. She stepped into spaces where doors weren't just closed. They didn't exist. And she didn't ask for a seat. She made one. No one moved. If we're honoring anyone tonight, he finished, lifting his glass, it should be her. Silence followed. Not the awkward kind, the heavy kind. The kind that makes people aware of themselves. I didn't smile. I didn't acknowledge it. My fingers rested lightly against the glass in front of me. Steady. Unmoved. Because recognition like that doesn't feel loud. It feels quiet. It feels like finally being seen without having to explain yourself. Around me, discomfort spread like a crack in glass. Chairs shifted. Eyes avoided mine. Vanessa's jaw tightened, her expression frozen between fury and restraint. This was her moment, her stage, and somehow it had tilted. My parents looked lost. My father stared down at the table, as if trying to piece together fragments of conversations he had once ignored. My mother's lips curved into something polite, something practiced, but her eyes betrayed confusion. They didn't know this version of me. To them, I had always been the warning, the example of what not to become, too focused, too distant, too unwilling to follow the script they understood. They had spent years shrinking me into something easier to explain, and now they didn't know how to expand that version again. But the truth is, I had stopped waiting for them a long time ago. There was a time I wanted their attention. Not approval, just attention. I wanted my achievements to matter in the same way trivial things did. I wanted conversations that went deeper than surface-level curiosity. That time passed. I built my life without them in it, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I learned, failed, adapted. I created something that didn't need validation to exist, and in doing that, I stopped needing them to understand. Later, when the music returned and laughter filled the gaps again, my mother approached me, carefully, like each step required permission. "You look beautiful tonight," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "We didn't realize all of this, what you've done." "I know." A pause stretched between us. "We're proud of you," she said finally. I looked at her, really looked this time. "Are you?" I asked quietly. She blinked, caught off guard. "Why now?" I continued. "Because someone important said it out loud? Or because you actually believe it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for my hand, holding it like it might bridge something that had been broken for years. But it didn't. Because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't fully accepted before. I didn't need them to be proud. And more importantly, I didn't need them at all. I realized something strange that night. Silence can be louder than applause and far more honest. She held the envelope between her fingers like it meant something, like it carried weight. I let her believe that, for a heartbeat. Then I released it completely and stepped away, as if I'd just handed over something far less important than she thought. The music inside swelled, laughter spilling through the open doors, but I was already done with that world. "Wait!" Vanessa's voice chased me down before I reached the exit. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble as she caught up. "You never told me about him." I didn't turn immediately. I let the pause stretch, let her sit in it. "You never asked," I said finally, calm but cutting. Her expression tightened. "That's not fair." I faced her then, meeting her eyes fully. "It's not unfair. It's just the truth." For a second, something fragile flickered across her face. Maybe guilt, maybe pride cracking. "You always made everything feel bigger than it needed to be, like I could never measure up." A quiet breath escaped me. "That's interesting," I said, "because I spent years shrinking myself so you and Mom wouldn't feel overwhelmed." That was it. No shouting, no dramatic ending, just two truths colliding and falling apart in the space between us. I walked out before she could respond. Outside, the night air felt colder than it should have, but it cleared my head in a way the crowded ballroom never could. Through the tall windows, I could still see the illusion continuing. People twirling, glasses raised, smiles stretched too wide to be real. I stayed there, just watching. A few guests passed me on their way out, their expressions shifting as recognition slowly dawned. One man hesitated, then approached like he was stepping into unfamiliar territory. "I didn't realize you were that Juliet Vaughn," he said, almost apologetic. I studied him for a moment, then gave a small shrug. "You still don't." He nodded awkwardly and left, his confidence unraveling with every step. A few minutes later, Edward joined me outside. No grand entrance, no announcement, just quiet presence. He stood beside me like we'd known each other for years, even though we hadn't. "I may have disrupted your evening," he said. I shook my head slightly. "You corrected a narrative." A faint smile crossed his face. "Some stories need rewriting." Then he did something unexpected. He didn't offer praise or empty compliments. He offered a future, a real one, a project, a partnership, a chance to build something that actually mattered, with my name not hidden, not minimized, but leading. I didn't rush my answer. For once, I let myself think without the noise of old expectations. Because this time the decision wasn't about proving anything to anyone, it was about me. Monday, I said eventually. We'll talk. He nodded, satisfied, and walked away like the deal was already understood. No celebration, no dramatic handshake, just certainty. Later, I drove home alone. No music, no distractions, just the steady hum of the road and the wind slipping through the half-open window. It was cold, sharp, but grounding. For years, I thought success would feel like recognition, like finally being seen. But that night, I understood something different. I had been visible all along. They just chose not to look. And for the first time, it didn't matter, because the real shift wasn't in that room or in their opinions. It was in me. I didn't need their approval anymore. And the twist? I never went back. Not to that family, not to that version of myself. But months later, when the initiative launched, their names weren't on the guest list. Mine was on the foundation.